Magazine Insider Podcast. I'm Greg Drevenstedt, Editor-in-Chief at Rider Magazine. Our guest today is Kevin Duke, an old friend of mine from the world of motorcycle journalism. Kevin was the editor-in-chief at motorcycle.com for more than a decade, and we've attended a bunch of press launches together over the years. In the spring of 2021, Kevin was hired as editor-in-chief at Thunder Press, an American V-twin magazine owned by the same company that owns Rider Magazine, and we've worked closely together on both publications over the past couple of years. The April 2022 issue of Thunder Press marked the publication's 30th anniversary, and for the next issue, the magazine was rebranded as American Rider. Kevin and I talked about some of our shared history and about the unique stories and event coverage in American Rider. If you love American-made motorcycles and the community that surrounds them, then you should check it out at AmericanRider.com. Before we get into the episode, I want you to know that the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast is now hosted on the Podbean platform, so you can now listen via Audible, iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, and many other platforms. We've also uploaded our entire podcast catalog, 54 episodes and counting, to YouTube. We drop a new episode every 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and keep the rubber side down. Hey there, Kevin. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. Good to be with you.
Awesome. Well, before we get started, there we go. All right, kids, don't drink and ride, but if you're at home like I am, you can have a cold one. So it's Friday afternoon. You and I are both had a full week. Most of the people that come on this podcast, I've maybe never met them. I definitely don't see them on Zoom calls very often, but you and I work together on Rider and American Rider for the same parent company. So we see each other on video calls several times a week. So I think this one will be a little bit more enjoyable than most of those meetings.
Yeah, I think so too. Some of those meetings get a little long and boring. This one's just talking about our magazines and the things that we're passionate about. So should be fun.
Absolutely. So for those people who are listening to the podcast who don't know, Kevin Duke is the editor-in-chief at American Rider. I'm the editor at Rider, and we're part of what's known as, I guess, the Rider Group. There's also Woman Rider, which is a website, and we're all owned by the same company. We'll get into American Rider in a bit, but I kind of want to go a little bit, hit rewind a little bit. I've been doing this, working for Rider and in the motorcycle magazine game since 2008, but you've been doing this longer than I am. How did you get started in motorcycle journalism?
It's goes back to when I was a kid. I was reading magazines and I was spouting off useless information to my mom, and she said, "Oh, Kevin, if only you knew your schoolwork like you know your motorcycles." And I'm like, wait a minute, maybe there's something there. And then I heard the old adage, if you enjoy your job, you never have to work again. And so I'm like, somebody's got to write this stuff. Why couldn't it be me? So I went to journalism school and ended up doing an internship at Cycle Canada magazine back in the mid-90s. And then I got hired by Motorcyclist magazine in 1997. Worked motorcyclist, then worked for Road Racing World, worked for Motorcycle Consumer News. And then I got hired on at Motorcycle USA when they were just a teeny little website, only had a few posts, and launched that. Eventually overtook motorcycle.com as the leading website in the United States. And then motorcycle.com poached me from motorcycleusa.com, and I worked at motorcycle.com for 11 or 13 years or something.
Wow. And so you've been doing this for a long time. You've ridden hundreds of different motorcycles. You did some racing in the past. Was it, more at an amateur level, club level, anything like that?
Yeah, it was more club level, but I've been on a lot of racetracks. I think it's something like 40 some racetracks now.
Wow.
And my bike resume is now, I think it's past 950 different motorcycles I've ridden.
Wow. It's funny. I have a roster that I think I stopped updating a couple of years ago. I need to update it, and I was like 450. So, and I realized some of those are different, model updates of existing bikes and things like that. But yeah, it's when you keep track of it, you realize that you end up riding a lot of different motorcycles. And that was actually one of the things I had to learn first was, I was a regular motorcycle enthusiast when I got started at the magazine and only ridden a handful of motorcycles. But whether you're going out on a comparison test or you're just swapping test bikes several times in a week, you've got to be able to jump on a brand new motorcycle and figure it out pretty fast and ride it competently, So, yeah.
And I love it because you're getting to know a new partner, and it's not quite the same as stumbling into a new bedroom partner in a personal life, but there's always something new to be experienced on motorcycles, and I love it. They all bring something different to the table, little nuances that make them distinct, and yeah, it sure has been a great life with motorcycles.
That's cool. Yeah, I've had more than a few embarrassing and awkward moments on motorcycles and with girlfriends. So, so, uh, but I guess you can get hurt more on a motorcycle. Maybe not financially, but well, I guess you could. But so
Well, you know what? The personal life gets deeper emotional scars, I'll say.
absolutely. Well, so you know, you're a family man. Yeah, you're married. You've got a kid. You've had to do a lot of travel. I mean, I realize that that's actually one of the things that you can and I can commiserate with. Most people are like, "Oh, you have a dream job," and they don't want to hear anything about your complaining about, you know, how much you have to travel or how much you have to do. But it is actually a job. There's work that's got to be done, and I think I've said this on the podcast before, and it was it Brian Catterson or Aaron Frank? You know, is the quoted as saying it's the best job in the world for 2 days a month.
I believe that was Aaron Frank, and it's true. One of the big misconceptions that people who are just looking from the outside goes, "Oh, it must be great to be riding motorcycles every day all the time." And it's like, gosh, you know what? If I had a regular job, I might ride motorcycles more often than I have time for in this job. But it's still fun just to be involved in the motorcycle industry, see how things are advancing and progressing, and yeah, it's a great industry.
Well, I had a contributor that I was communicating with via email. I went to a KTM launch in Portugal in early December, and I was, you know, telling him that yeah, I'm just trying to tie up some loose ends before I go to the airport. And he's like, "Oh man, must be a great life. You get to, you know, go to Europe." I was like, "Well, it's going to take me probably 24 hours of travel to get to Europe. Then I'm going to be there for 36 hours. I'm going to ride the bike for 1 day. And, you know, it's usually maybe 100 to 150 miles. And then I've got to get on a airport shuttle at 6 o'clock the following morning and travel another 24 hours to get home. So we're usually it's surgical strike. You parachute in, you
Yeah.
ride a bike, you've got to get all the technical information, you got to do your video, you got to do your photos and a lot of stuff. So it can be great and fun and whirlwind thing, but it is a lot more time in airports and taxis and shuttles and things like that than you are on the saddle of a motorcycle.
You know it, but then, how often do our readers get to be invited to Portugal to come ride a new motorcycle no one else has ever ridden? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of that, I mean, like I said, you and I have been on a bunch of launches together because, you know, when you were at motorcycle.com, I was at Ryder. Like I said, I started in 2008. So I know we've been to South Africa twice together on BMW launches. We've been to Europe a bunch of times. What are some of your favorite sort of assignments and launches that you've been on? Whether it's, you know, it can be, you know, something here in the States, it's been a trip that you did or something like that, or it can be a launch that was a pretty special experience. Any favorites?
Well, probably too many favorites to list, but I'll do a couple. I've been lucky enough to be at Jay Leno's garage 4 times,
Wow.
and I've always, since the first time I met him, I'm like, God gave the right person money this time. That guy is like an enthusiast like no other. He'll walk you around. He's got hundreds of vehicles, right? If you include bikes and cars,
Right.
and he knows intricate details about everything. So just being able to hang around a celebrity like that and get to know that he's as passionate or even more passionate about motorcycles than you and I are, it's just fantastic that that guy is such a great ambassador for the sport of motorcycling.
Right. Well, yeah, I've actually been to his garage once, actually, for they unveiled the BMW K1600s there at his garage, and he did his walking tour as he does, and he's got his usual uniform of jeans and you know, denim shirt, and he's not one of those. I mean, he's fabulously rich, but he's not one of those people who has a collection just to polish his ego or bragging rights with his friends. His encyclopedic knowledge of every single vehicle he has in his collection and his ability to operate it, ride it, whatever it is, was just breathtaking. He just went around and held court for a solid hour. I mean, everything from, you know, steam powered cars to electric vehicles to, you know, motorcycles of every vintage and hot cars and old cars and everything else. And yeah, it's super impressive, his level of knowledge, and he's an absolute gearhead.
And another celebrity gearhead who's been fun to hang around a few times, Keanu Reeves, recently rode the Arch Motorcycles 1S. and got to ride along with him. And he is like as casual as you could imagine any celebrity being. He likes riding motorcycles. I was at a track day with him once a few years ago, and it was a very small group. And he spun more time on the track than anybody else who was at that track day. And you don't do that if you're just a celebrity who's looking to, just show off for a little while. He just really loves it, and he just kept getting on and going out. And yeah, he's a real passionate guy about motorcycles, and I think he's another great ambassador for our sport.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I know you went to that event. I haven't met Keanu, but from what you've said and other folks I've talked to, is that yeah, it's not just an image thing for him. There's certainly plenty of celebrities that have owned bikes or have shown up at events and things like that. But yeah, it's a true passion for him. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
And one more, I'll say, I don't know if you were at the Leno garage when I was there, and it was rainy. And all the journalists took their cars to Leno's house because it was raining. And in California, we don't like riding in the rain. And who showed up but Harrison Ford on a BMW F800 GS or something like that. He was another guy who, passionate about motorcycles, and he rode to Leno's house, whereas all these pansy journalist had to show up in a car with a roof.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the K1600 launch. He was there. And it's funny because he's good friends with Jay Leno, but he didn't want to talk to any of the journalists. He was, I mean, Harrison, you guys, he does his own thing. He doesn't really do interviews much, and he didn't want to talk to a bunch of hangers on who wanted to get his photo and put it in their magazine or something. So yeah, he was there, but he definitely had his own little force field around him, during that event. So well, I mentioned that we've gone to South Africa a couple of times for press launches, and one of them was for the BMW R1200 GS water boxer, and that ended up being a bonding experience for you and I, as that event was going to be 2 days of riding. It got cut a day short because Kevin Ash, a British motorcycle journalist, actually died at that event, and so they really had to cut the event short. And you and I ended up with a free day back at the hotel before our flight was supposed to take us back to the United States. And I don't know how we got on the notion of doing it, but it was one of those things where I think for me, and maybe for both of us, we kind of needed to do something life affirming, that somebody that does what we do for a living had succumbed to his injuries in an accident. I didn't really know Kevin Ash personally. So we borrowed a car from BMW, and in South Africa, they drive on the left-hand side of the road, so the steering wheel's on the wrong side of the vehicle. And so you and I drove about an hour, 2 hours to the Bloukrans Bridge, and the entire time we were driving there, when I was trying to keep the car on the road, I was really hoping that you would say, I don't know if I really want to do this. Because I was getting pretty nervous. I was going to chicken out, but you never did, so I stuck with it. And we went to the Bloukrans Bridge, which is 700 meters above the Bloukrans River and is the highest commercial bungee jump. And so you and I went there, and basically they had a walkway under the arched structure of the bridge, and we got out there and bungee jumped off that bridge.
Yeah, that was memorable for both those reasons. I've never been on a press launch where a journalist has died from crashing a bike, and that really shook everybody up, And then to get that chance to jump off this giant bridge and come away still breathing, life affirming, that, as you said, that's the perfect description, because I felt really alive after that, and lucky to be alive and experience things still. And yeah, that was a unforgettable experience, that one.
Yeah, that's the only time I've done bungee jumping. It's like I've jumped out of an airplane once, and I think once is enough. That was one of those experiences. It was like 2 seconds of sheer terror, and then it was this really awesome experience. And so, like I said, for me, it wasn't about like, hey, let's go do something risky, because bungee jumping is a safe thing, especially in a commercial environment like that. We weren't base jumping, and we weren't in a squirrel suit, or anything like that. So it was a safe activity, but it doesn't feel safe in the moment necessarily, as you're jumping off a perfectly good bridge and you can see the rocks in the down there at the bottom. But yeah, that you were willing to do that with me. I mean, I think that was one of those things that was a bonding experience, and we've been good buddies ever since. So Let's talk about American Rider. You've been the editor since 2021. So, and that was back when it was still called Thunder Press. So, give us a little bit of backstory on what Thunder Press was, its founder, and then the transition to American Rider.
Yeah, well, Thunder Press, the 30-year history. It's always a giveaway magazine found in Harley dealers, some Indian dealers, and so it got to be part of the motorcycle culture, biker culture, perhaps. And then when COVID hit, before I got hired, we switched to from the free giveaway model to a subscription model. So we were changing from just a newsprint kind of giveaway thing into something really kind of special and unique. And so, yeah, we ran Thunder Press, took it to its 30th anniversary issue. And then in May of 2022, I think I got that right,
Yeah.
we switched the name over to American Rider. That was another title that was in our parent company's past history. It was around for a few years, and I figured that Thunder Press kind of undersold what we were doing, and American Rider was more inclusive of the kind of content that belongs in a quality print publication or a digital issue. And so, yeah, American Rider, it encompasses everything, always about American motorcycles and the people who ride them, people who are passionate about American motorcycles, do custom builders, that kind of stuff. That's obviously one of our focuses. Motorcycle rallies is another big one. And I've also brought in a lot of historical content. There's a lot of things about history that have been stories that have been retold as fact. And when you dig in a little deeper, you realize, hey, they got this wrong. These guys got this wrong. And one of our contributors, Todd Rafferty, likes to pull the old slogan, never let the facts get in the way of a good story. And for myself, I prefer the facts, because if I'm putting it down on a printed page or on a digital edition, I want that to be a reference that can be regarded as historical fact and not just somebody else's story retold with different words.
Well, I mean, some of your own work, like you said, you mentioned Todd Rafferty. I know you've also got a longtime contributor, Kip Woodring, who brings in some of the historical stuff. He's also a very technically inclined guy, really knows the history of particularly Harley Davidson and a lot of the development of the brand and the engineering. But you know, you had I don't recall the month or year of the issue, but early on you had devoted much of an issue to Crocker, which is a pretty, legendary brand, but a small company. It was, a hot rod motorcycle of its day, but only about 70 of them were ever produced. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's another controversial topic, is that how many were produced. You'd figure in a serialized production, the numbers would correspond to the numbers of bikes produced. And that's not the way Al Crocker did it. The Crocker was special. It was the first overhead valve V-twin made in America. And it came out the same year as Harley's Knucklehead. And the Knucklehead is one of the most valuable motorcycles that you can buy now. And the Crocker kind of beat it slightly to the punch by a couple of months, and it was faster than the Knucklehead. And so when I started diving into it, I was discovering that some of the things reported about Crockers weren't quite accurate. And yeah, with the odd serialized production, now nobody's really sure how many were produced. And there's also a guy named Michael Shack who owns the Crocker name now. He produces reproduction parts. And so since the frames didn't have numbers on it, it's kind of a little bit unknown how many Crockers are actually produced. But yeah, they were America's first superbike, and that issue really dragged a lot out of me, because I could just repeat the same old stories and have an article done and we could, move on to the next issue. But I kept digging. I ended up talking to Judy Crocker Jones, Al Crocker Jr.'s daughter, to get some more historical accounts, and found out things from her that nobody's ever reported. And it's been really fun to dig into history. And just currently I'm digging into the Captain America bike from the Easy Rider movie. It's probably the world's most recognized motorcycle, and there's a whole bunch of facts about that have been retold that aren't true. And so I feel like I should just stop and leave it alone, but I keep wanting to chase down the details so that I'm bringing something new to the readers. When they read this story about Captain America, our readers will know things that other people that haven't been reported before. So it's really fascinating to dig into history. I love that part of my job.
Well, I mean, again, thinking about the American made motorcycles, these days most people just, I mean, basically it's two brands, Harley Davidson, Indian, but that rivalry and those two as leading brands goes way back in history. Indian was started in 1901, Harley Davidson started in 1903, but Indian went out of business in 1953, and then there was various attempts to resurrect it, and really until Polaris came along in 2011 and bought that brand, it's finally sort of back on solid footing. From actually one of Todd Rafferty's books and talking to him, I've got one of his like encyclopedias of early American motorcycles. And I think what a lot of people don't appreciate is that in the early decades of the 20th century, there were upwards of 300 different motorcycle manufacturers.
Right.
I mean, the industry was very young. It was sort of like some companies were just bolting engines onto bicycles, and even I don't know how you say his first name, Ignaz Schwinn, owned some motorcycle companies, and the Schwinn name everybody knows from bicycles, but it was really trying to configure itself in many ways. And two of the earliest brands, Harley Davidson, Indian, ultimately, became the survivors. But you mentioned Crocker, there was Excelsior Henderson, there have been various others, and there have been attempts to resurrect some of these brands. The Excelsior Henderson one in the, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s was a pretty spectacular, financial boondoggle, I guess would be the best way to put it. So that you've got that sort of content in American Rider about, lesser known marks or brands that these days, there maybe you see them in museums. I know there was just the Mecum auction in Las Vegas, and some of these brands that you'll see in a context like that, but they're not household names like Harley Davidson, Indian.
But all those brands, Thor, Yale, Autobee, a whole bunch of brands, that's how the motorcycle industry got to where we are now. It wasn't till it was World War I really shook out a whole bunch of motorcycle manufacturers, when it was kind of a free-for-all. And then after the Great Depression, that shook out just about everybody. It was just Indian and Harley after that, pretty much. And so, it's interesting to see how the whole American motorcycle story has evolved. And I'm really proud of another series that we've been doing lately, Early Rider. Kip Woodring, one of our contributors. We started out in the 1900s, the aughts of the 20th century. And so he's running through every decade of motorcycle history, and he has a reader who brings you into that decade and tells the story of motorcycling then. So where are we at now? The 1930s.
Yep.
And so it's another great way to tell stories about motorcycles that aren't being told anywhere else.
Well, having read those articles and been involved in the the proofreading process with those to see how they've come together. I mean, it's interesting because it's one thing to talk about the actual development of technology and motorcycles and engine configurations and things like that, and suspension and so forth. But what Kip's doing in that series, it's really placing it into this historical context. You mentioned World War I or the Great Depression, or the development of other technologies. The part of what really hurt the early motorcycle industry was the development of an inexpensive automobile, and so Henry Ford and other inexpensive automobiles and things like that. So it was the early days of American motorcycling was sort of like is in some ways kind of like motorcycles in Europe. There was an inexpensive form of transportation that anybody could afford, but it was sort of supplanted by the car. But in Europe and other parts of the world, the motorcycle, either for space constraints because you're in a crowded city, or I was just in India earlier this month for a Royal Enfield launch, and there are many people where a small displacement 100cc motorcycle is a huge investment for a family or a person, and that is their main vehicle, and they transport goods and they transport their family on a little tiny motorcycle. So it's just a different context. So that the historical context of the development of like the environment in which those motorcycles were evolving, I find very fascinating in that series.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so. And like I say, you won't find these stories in other publications. So, I mean, if you have any kind of appreciation for history, and of course motorcycles, everybody listening to this is into motorcycles. We've got stories being told that haven't been told anywhere else.
Well, and what's interesting, you had referenced the fact that American Rider was it was a magazine that was owned by our previous parent company. You know, there's been different mergers and acquisitions over the years, and Rider was actually founded by the son of Art Rouse, by Dennis Rouse, who ran a company called Trailer Life Enterprises. So we were part of a big RV consortium at some point, so forth. We're now part of a privately owned company, but American Rider in its early days was in, again, the late 90s, early 2000s. That was part of the Harley Davidson craze when there was these huge markups on motorcycles and there was waiting lists, and then there were all of these cruiser brands that and chopper brands, that was the Big Dog and American Iron and all those companies that just popped up out of nowhere to try and fill the unmet need. But then none of those, as soon as we had the Great Recession, like you were saying, with the Great Depression, wiped out a bunch of motorcycle brands and only the strongest were able to survive. That's sort of how things played out again. So it's interesting that there's as some of those stories evolve, that once you get closer in contemporary history, there's other brands that were kind of a flash in the pan. They were cool for a moment and then they came and went. So
yeah. Another thing we haven't talked about yet was for press launches. Last year I got to ride the Harley Davidson King of the Baggers road glide at a racetrack, so that won the championship that year. And what an experience to ride. It was all jacked up and super tall, like taller than an adventure bike. Couldn't even touch the ground. I had to get the pit crew to kind of wheel me out.
This is unusual for a cruiser.
Yeah. And then just in a couple of weeks from now, I'll be riding Indian's King of the Baggers, the championship winning bike from Indian from the 2022 season. So, I had some racetrack experience previously, and now it just seems pretty unusual to be getting racetrack experiences on Harleys and Indians. And these things are a far cry from the stock bikes, which are, nice, comfortable touring bikes or, street roadsters, whatever. But you get on these race bikes, they go, I think at Daytona, they were going over 160 miles an hour.
Wow.
So these are not slow machines. So to get a chance to throw a leg over these specialized machines that are based on stock bikes, that's another whole new aspect to riding American motorcycles.
Well, you've had, in American Rider, you've had quite a bit of coverage about the bagger racing. I mean, that's been one of those unexpectedly super successful phenomena that, there's of course been flat track racing. And again, that's a major Harley Davidson Indian rivalry. Of course, there's, Yamahas and KTMs and Kawasaki's in different classes and things like that. But Harley Davidson Indian are the two big ones. But this bagger racing is the King of the Baggers thing is nuts. It was kind of like hey, let's just give this a shot as an exhibition thing for Moto America, which is more known for its super bike racing and super stock racing and things like that. So it's been really cool to see how popular, and it's become its own draw to a lot of Moto America rounds.
Exactly. Yeah. When I first heard about it was like a one-off race that they did a couple of years ago. And when I first heard about it, I thought it was kind of like a clown show kind of event.
Yeah.
It'll be stupid. And then all the people, right? Oh, are you going to have the stereo turned up? Or are you going to be able to fit 12 packs in the saddlebags and then crack them after the race? But yeah, the racing's turned out to be really exciting, and the bikes are way faster than anybody imagined a couple of years ago. So yeah, for the Harley Indian rivalry to be still intact after all these years and see it play out on road race tracks, it's fantastic. And if I may, for Moto America races, right, it's always the sport bike crowd who comes, and the King of the Baggers class has added a whole new dimension to who comes out to attend and be the audience for this. So it's great for Moto America, and it's great for fans of American motorcycles.
Well, like you say, I mean, even though the motorcycles themselves, when you get up close to them personally, you throw a leg over them, they're not stock and they're far from stock, but they look from a distance like a road glide or a street glide or a Challenger or something like that. And so I think people can relate to it. And then there's this whole segment of the motorcycle enthusiast population that is just really into American made vehicles. They, people like Fords and Chevrolets, and so American made brands, and something that they can relate to. I mean, NASCAR stock car is a super popular series because people feel like it's relatable in a way that maybe, like IndyCar racing or F1 racing or sport bike racing may not be as relatable as it feels like for some people. So yeah.
Yeah, and the King of the Bagger series, they are highly modified, but the Harley guys, when I took the Road Glide out last year, their race bike, their King of the Baggers bike, they confirmed that the frame on the bike is stock. They haven't changed the frame. It's not gusseted or redone. It's the stock frame. They got a different swing arm, different suspension, of course, and a hot rod motor, but the bones of the bike are still the stock bike. So it's pretty fascinating to see how fast they can make these bikes, these production bikes.
Well, another thing that your American Rider is known for is you do a lot of event coverage. There's some major rallies, of course, Bike Week and Sturgis and things like that, but there are some smaller events that you give some coverage. You've got an event calendar in the back of every issue that really is pretty comprehensive in terms of everything from, small bike shows and swap meets to more local or regional rallies and everything else. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about the event coverage.
Well, there's a real community with motorcyclists and biker type motorcyclists in particular, and they like to gather with their friends and new friends with motorcycles as the backdrop. So this is an important part of the culture, and so that calendar it's really widely referred to because people want to get out and they can see what their options are. And there's some really great events going on. You mentioned a couple of the big ones. An event in our March issue is the High Seas Rally, which was went off last October, I believe. And it's a bike rally on a cruise ship. So you come on board a cruise ship. You got custom bikes in the cruise ship. You have a bike show based on pictures that are in the elevators, so people can enter their bikes in this virtual bike show. So you can't fit 500 bikes on a cruise ship, but you can have a lot of really high-end customized bikes. And then there were seminars on from Paul Yaffe and Dave Perowitz, and so it just seems so weird to be talking about a bike rally on a cruise ship, but by all accounts it was a blast. And I'm going to clear my schedule for the 2023 edition and hope to get on that one because it really looked fun.
Yeah, that feature is pretty cool because the Olivier Touran, who shot the photos and wrote it, he's got some great photos of these cranes loading a few of these custom bikes onto the cruise ship. Because like you said, not everybody can ride aboard. They had secured parking for anybody who rode to the cruise ship port, but that they could throughout the cruise ship have some of these, premium high-end custom builds there. There was a big fundraiser, over $100,000 for a number of wounded warriors and a dialysis project and stuff. And somebody won this really cool custom bike. So yeah, it was quite an event.
Yeah, a beautiful custom bike. Xavier Muriel, who Providence Cycle Works, used to be the drummer for Buck Cherry, doing custom bikes, and that was the raffle item. And anybody who joined the cruise was automatically entered, and some lucky high seas cruise rally customer got to take the bike home. And yeah, fantastic. And that's another cool part about this kind of motorcycle culture, the charity, the fundraising. And bikers are amazingly generous. When there's a worthy charity, they show up and they contribute money. And yeah, there was I think over $200,000 raised on that rally for a couple of different charities. So yeah, fantastic.
Well, and also some of these builders that devote thousands of hours to their custom motorcycles, and that they'll often donate something to a raffle or something like that for a good cause. And you've had a few features about the charity aspect of motorcycling, and particularly in the biker community. And yeah, anybody who is a motorcyclist who's on the inside of that sort of tribe or in the tent knows that the sort of the external perception is often fairly negative. Is that there's persistent myths about bikers and motorcyclists, and whether people ride crotch rockets or open pie parleys or whatever it is that they say that they do. There's always a few bad eggs, but motorcyclists are just people, and they like to get together with each other and share their passion and be part of a community, just like people that are into gardening or bowling or something. It's just, I would say, motorcycling is probably a lot more fun.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And further to the charity thing, one of the biggest beneficiaries from charitable biker events are soldiers, veterans, and that's something also I'm really proud of. It's another part of the American story and how motorcycles are associated with it. We do a lot of coverage, and pretty much if there's something that's going to benefit veterans, I want to help promote it, because those guys are way bigger heroes than I'll ever be. And if there's anything that we can do as a community to support that, I'm all for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I have to say, it's been a pleasure working with you over the last couple of years. Like I said, you and I were mostly buddies and colleagues at two different publications. And so we would see each other at events. And it's just like my former boss, Mark Tuttle, when he was the editor at Rider, we would go out on photo shoots and things together and spend time, but you never go to the same press launch as somebody that works for your same publication. And so you and I don't see each other at press launches as much, but being able to work together and to craft some of the content for our respective publications and to be a resource for each other has been great. The thing is, it's also these days it's unfortunately fairly rare that there just aren't that many motorcycle magazines left. There's a lot of websites out there. There are bloggers, there are YouTubers, there are influencers or people under the influence or whatever it is, but is for a publication that you can still get in a print format. So we have digital versions of our magazines, but if you want to get a copy of the magazine sent to your mailbox every month, you can do that. And it's particularly rare in the case of the V-twin community. Is American Rider is probably the only print publication left. I mean, I know they're trying to bring back Easy Riders, a couple other things, but in terms of a consistent publication history, American Rider and its previous name of Thunder Press is, like I said, you celebrated your 30th anniversary last spring, and so you'll celebrate your 31st anniversary this spring.
Yeah, and it annoys me when I hear people online say, "Oh, I used to subscribe to 6 motorcycle magazines, and now I can't get any." And it's like, wait a minute, you didn't hear about American Rider yet, or Rider. And just to throw some shine back on you, Greg, I think Rider Magazine and American Rider Magazine both do a good job telling stories about motorcycles, but mostly the people in it. There are a lot of websites, it's like, hey, here's the newest bike, and that's all there is to it. And for people who have interest in the human condition, I think the stories Rider brings and American Rider brings adds a really great dimension to the overall motorcycle story. And so, yeah, when I hear people say, "Oh, there's no more print magazines," it's like, no, you're wrong. And there's at least 2 really good ones available for you.
Well, it's been an honor to work for a magazine where, as you said, very early on, is what got you into this business in the first place. You're saying, if you enjoy what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And although the reality is there's a lot of work involved, but again, it's something that you believe in. It's something you're enthusiastic about. So it becomes a labor of love because, we don't get rich doing this. You don't get paid a lot working for a magazine. You can only do so much with free helmets and gloves. Like, I can't send an Arai helmet to my mortgage company and have them, give me any credit for it. So, but the thing is, there is content that's out there. Like I said, it's been a challenging thing in the motorcycle media landscape, I guess would be the best way to put it. I know you've worked for a number of websites, and there's a ton of them out there, and there is lots of just sort of quick hit content and information like that. And what you and I are both, what I think the reason why we enjoy working with each other is we want to tell good stories or help facilitate the telling of those stories, because we don't write all the content in our magazine. A lot of times it's written by other people, but there's a lot of work that goes into getting something ready to publish. And like you said, absolutely, the human interest. I mean, you're talking about whether there's a charity component to a rally or to certain events, or what it is that people do. It's really the passion or true belief in the community and what you're doing. And that's what I think readers really enjoy. Is it's anything that's kind of, like you said, kind of human interest. It's the challenges, it's the family experiences. It's a father-son trip. It's, the last trip that somebody took or something like that. Yeah, that's a great part of it, and what we hope will, readers will appreciate.
It's far more immersive than pretty much anything you'll find online, right? There's a way of telling stories that brings you in. A lot of websites that talk about motorcycles, it's like that quick hit thing. Oh, good, it's got 2 millimeter larger valves. Okay, that's good. And I appreciate that too, but I rarely find anything as immersive as the content that you and I bring to our readers.
Yeah. Well, I want to give credit to, we share an art director, senior art director. His name is Chad Cochran. That's the thing about a print publication. Again, yes, there are digital versions of our magazines, but I think, like you, I much prefer to get it in hand and have a physical magazine, because it can take the photography, can take the story, and in a professionally done layout, is, as you turn the page, the placement of the photos and the captions and everything. You talked about an immersive experience. When you're scrolling through a web story on a phone, it can be the exact same story, that is on a website, but it just happens to be like photo text, and you're just kind of scrolling through with your thumb or something. You're doing it while you're standing in line at the grocery store. It's a different experience than sitting on your couch, or, with a cup of coffee or a glass of whiskey or whatever. You're sitting on the throne. I mean, it's just like somehow where you've got some time where you can sort of enjoy the experience. And we have a lot of readers who say, hey, our subscriptions are more expensive than they used to be, quite a bit more. It's like, hey, I still want to get print. I'll pay the premium to get print. It's no longer $1 an issue or whatever it used to be, but we want to make sure that they get the value that's, like, we're putting our heart and soul into it, and we're hoping that it's appreciated. And I think we both get some good feedback. We get some negative feedback from some people, but it's I know it's appreciated by a lot of our readers. So,
right. In contemporary days, there's hardly a human on the planet who doesn't spend too much time in front of a screen.
yeah.
And I love reading about motorcycle content, and I get really tired of spending all my days in front of a screen. So when you can take a print publication, step away from the screen, just read it, immerse yourself into that story, it's a different experience. And it's a more high quality experience, rather than just the quick scroll and trying to look at a couple of pictures and then move on to your email or your Instagram feed or whatever.
Well, hey, for everybody out there who's listening, I mean, if you're not already a subscriber to Writer, American Writer, I mean, we, get an issue of each magazine in your inbox, or your actual mailbox every month. You can get it in your inbox. There are digital editions, but subscribers is how we stay in business. Advertisers and subscribers, if you enjoy good motorcycle content, we would appreciate, any kind of support from readers and listeners and so forth. So AmericanWriter.com is the website for the magazine. There are buttons that you can subscribe to the e-newsletter, which is free. You can subscribe to the digital edition. You can subscribe to the print edition. On the homepage of AmericanWriter.com, you can see what's in the current issue of the magazine. There's also lots of newsy information. I mean, you're like any other website. There's some stuff that is quick hit news stuff that ends up on a website, goes out on social media and stuff. But yeah, we're on all the channels.
And don't be one of those readers who says, "Oh, I wish there was still print magazines for motorcycles," because there are. And if you subscribe, we'll keep bringing you some great content. And I'm proud of the work we're doing together, Greg.
Awesome. Well, hey, I'm glad that you and I were able to catch up, talk about American Writer. It's a pleasure working with you. I'm glad we're not in a meeting together. I'm glad that my beer is about empty. I'm going to need to get another one. It's Friday afternoon for both of us, so I think I'm going to probably shut down after this interview is over. But it's great chatting with you. It's great working with you, and we'll have links to American Writer and various things on the show. But again, AmericanWriter.com if you're into American V twins. And the history of American motorcycles, the community within American motorcycling, that's what the magazine's all about.
Excellent. Great talking to you, Greg.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening for the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast. I'm Greg Drevenstedt. Keep the rubber side down. If you've enjoyed listening to the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast, please subscribe, leave us a positive rating, and tell your friends. We also encourage you to visit ridermagazine.com, where you can get the latest in motorcycle news and reviews and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. You can also subscribe to print and digital editions of Rider Magazine, which is published 12 times a year. Thanks again for listening.